Hey everybody. Okay, in this particular video, what we're going to be doing is learning how to create a frequency distribution table in Excel. And to do this, we're going to be using some of the features that you are actually going to be working with in your Excel lab. So pay very, very close attention. And if you need to rewind and look at this video again, you always have it handy. So in any case, the first thing that you need to know is that we're going to be working with the class with formula on page 41. So again, I expect you to be familiar with that. And our frequency table is going to look like table 2-2 at the top of page 42. The only difference is that our frequency table is not going to have the tallies. So you don't have to put the tallies in there. So our frequency table will consist of class limits, class boundaries, frequency, and class midpoints, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and let's get this party started. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my columns, my initial columns that I need. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight these two cells. And actually, I'm going to highlight these two cells. And then I'm going to come over here where it says merge and center, and then I'm going to say merge it across, and I'm going to type in here class limits, and then here we're going to do lower for our lower class limits and upper for upper class limits, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to center those because we're going to cut and paste them into Word. Then I'm going to do the same thing here, go to merge and center, do merge across, and then here I'm going to type class boundaries, and then again lower and upper, and then we're going to center them. All right, so the first column that we are actually going to work with is going to be our class limits, because we need to get our class limits before we do our class boundaries. That's always important. And before we can do our class limits, we have to know what our class width is, and before we can compute our class width, we got to know how many classes that we're working with. Well, in this particular example that I'm doing based off of the weights of carry-on luggage in pounds, which is example 6, we are going to be working with 6 classes, okay? So the number of classes that we're going to be working with are 6 classes. So I'm just going to go ahead and just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I won't get carried away and create more classes than I need. So we're going to be working with 6 classes. So to compute our class width, we're going to come up here and I'm going to give myself a little bit of room, and I'm going to type in here class width. Now the formula that we need to use is on page 41, and the formula says take the difference between your largest data value and your smallest data value, and then divide that by the number of classes that you're going to be working with. Well, one of the features that you're going to learn as you work through Excel in your Excel labs is how to do computations in Excel. So hit your equals key, hit your open paren, your left paren, and we're going to do our largest value. Well, our largest value is down here, so we can just go ahead and click on that column. And when we come back up, do you see where it says A43? A43 is where our largest value was. And then we're going to say, subtract that from our smallest value. Well, our smallest value is here at A4. So it's good. Basically what this formula is saying is take the value in A43, subtract it from the value in A4, and then we're going to need to close paren, and then we're going to tell it to divide it by the number of classes that we're going to be using. And the number of classes that we're going to be using is 6. So I hit 6, hit enter, and I get 8.5. Now, if you go back and to page 41 and you look at the procedure says that basically what you always want to do is you always want to round up to the next whole number. So instead of having a class width of 8.5, we're going to have a class width of 9. Even if this class width here was a whole number, let's say this class width was 8, you're still going to round up and you're still going to use the next whole number, because when you are creating your classes have to be wide enough that all the data from your lowest value to your highest value can be contained in the classes that you've created. So we have a class width of 8.5, but what we're going to do is we are going to use 9. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a 9 here. All right. So that lets me know what class width that I'm going to use. As a matter of fact, what I can always do is I can always say, okay, let's go ahead and let's round this up. Okay. All right. So my class width is going to be 9. And if you did not see what I did, let me delete that. If you didn't see what I did, I just went up to here, which basically tells it to decrease the number of decimal places that you have, and then it rounded it to 9. Okay, so I start with my lowest value. So I'm going to do my lower class limits first. So my lowest value in my data is 0. Now, what I'm going to do as I move downward through my lower class limits is I'm going to add my class width. So 0 plus 9, that's going to give me 9. 9 plus 9, that's going to give me 18. 18 plus 9, that's going to give me 27. 27 plus 9, that's going to give me 36. And 36 plus 9, that's going to give me 45. Okay. Now we've got all of our lower class limits. Now what we need are our upper class limits. Now you should have read through the material, and one of the things that you should know about your class limits is that they do not overlap. So in my first class here, my lower limit is 0. My upper limit is going to be 1 less than the lower limit of my next class. So the lower limit of my next class is 9. My upper limit is going to be 8. Notice again, when I get to my second class, the lowest limit of my second class is 18. My upper class in my second class is going to be 17. Now, if you notice, if I add 9 to 8, I get 17. So I can go ahead and I can add 9 as I move down through here, and then I would have gotten all of the values that I need for my upper class limit. So if I add 9 to 17, I get 26. If I add 9 to here, I get 35. If I add 9 to here, I get 44. And if I add 9 to 44, I get 53. Now notice my lowest value is 0, my highest value is 51. The upper limit of my last class is 53. So I have enough classes for all my data to fit in. So now what I need to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to center these. Now I need to go ahead and I need to get my class boundaries. Now when I go ahead and do my class boundaries, your class boundaries when you're working with integers, for your lower class boundary, it's always going to be zero point 0.5 less, and your upper class boundary is going to be zero point 0.5 more. So if I subtract zero point 0.5 from 0, I'm going to get negative. Okay? And if I add zero point 0.5 to my upper class here, I'm going to get 8.5. And then I can go ahead and as I move on down, if I do zero point 0.5 less than 9, I get 8.5. And if I add zero point 0.5 to 17, I get 17.5. And one of the things that you should notice is if you go ahead and if you add 9 down here, you will get the rest of your lower classes and you will get the rest of your lower boundaries and your upper boundaries. So let's go ahead and let's continue down. So if I do zero point 0.5 less than 18, I get 17.5. If I do zero point 0.5 more than 26, I get 26.5. If I do zero point 0.5 less than 27, I get 26.5. If I do zero point 0.5 more than 35, I get 35.5. If I do zero point 0.5 less than 36, I get 35.5. And if I do zero point 0.5 more than 44, I get 44.5. And if I do zero point 0.5 less than 45, I do 44.5. And zero point 0.5 more than 53 is 53.5. Okay, so now I've got my class limits upper and lower. I've got my class boundaries upper and lower. Now, the reason why this particular exercise was important is because when you go ahead and you use your data analysis tool is going to go ahead and create the frequencies based on your upper class boundaries. So if I go ahead and I do data and I go to the data analysis pack. Now, if you don't have the data analysis pack installed, then you need to go back to your Excel lab manual and you need to read how to do that because it tells you to do that and it tells you how to do it in your Excel lab manual. Okay, so I'm not going to go through that in this particular example. It's something that you should have already had done. So I'm going to go ahead and click on data analysis. And then since we're asked to create a histogram, because basically we use the information from our frequency distribution table to create our histogram, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click histogram and then I'm going to click OK. Now it says the input range. Now the input range is going to be where our data is. So input range is where our data is. So this is our input range. So once I've highlighted those um, the values in that column, I click off of it and then it asks me where is my bin range at. Now my bin range is going to be where my upper boundary is. Now, it explains all of this to you in your Excel lab manual, and if I were you, I would go ahead and practice with the example they have in the lab manual before you actually do this in class because there's not going to be any do-overs. I don't do do-overs. I expect you to read the instructions and know what you're supposed to do before you start. Not just do it, then I grade it, then you see that you didn't do something, then you want to resubmit it. No. Go ahead and read all the directions. Be clear about what you got to do before you start. So in my bin range is going to be my upper boundary. So I click here and then I highlight this column here and then I click off. Now it says we're not going to highlight labels. Now we're going to go to our output range. Now our output range is actually going to start where we want the labels to be. So my output range that I'm going to put is going to be is actually going to be right here. That's going to be my to go back and re-highlight my data. Okay, and then we've got my bin range. So my output range is actually going to be where I want my labels to start, where I want my labels to start here. So I'm going to go ahead, I clicked where I want my labels to go, and then it says, okay, do you want to do cumulative percentage? Well, you'll read about that as you go through your Excel lab exercise. And chart output, we want to create a histogram because the exercise does ask for a histogram. So we want to click that, and then we want to click OK. Alrighty, so now it gives us this histogram, and we'll talk about that later. But do you see where it actually repeats your upper class boundaries again for your bin? And then do you see here where it has a value for more? Now, typically, you can have a frequency distribution where you have more, and what more is, if you have values that are greater than, um, then you have kind of like a spot to put them. Well, we don't want the more here because we've already determined that we've got 6 classes, and we can look at our upper and lower class limits to see that we've got enough bins to put them in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually delete this off of here. So I'm going to go over to home. I'm going to go over to where it says delete. I'm going to go over where it says delete cells. And then what we want to do here is we just want the shift cells up. So bam. Okay, so notice when I deleted it from here, I also deleted it from here as well. And we'll get to formatting this histogram in a minute. So right now we've got our class limits, we've got our class boundaries, a number of classes. We don't really need this bin, but I'll show you how to get rid of it when we copy and paste everything over to Excel. But what we do want to make sure of is we've got 40 values here, and we want to make sure that this adds up to our 40 values. So if we do 2 plus 3, we get 5. 5 plus 10, that's 15. 15 plus 16, that's 31. 31 plus 6, that's 37. 37 plus 3, that is 40. So your frequency is always going to add up to the number of values that you have in your data set. All right. So let's go ahead and well, before we copy and paste this into Excel, let's do one more thing. Let's create our midpoints. Okay. So basically what your midpoint is, and let's center that, what your midpoint is just the average of either your class limits or your class boundaries. It doesn't matter which one you use, you're still going to get the same thing. So when we talk about the average, if I take 0 plus 8 and I divide it by 2, then my midpoint's going to be 4. If I take 9 plus 17, which is going to be 26, and I divide it by 2, that's going to be 13. Now what you need to notice here is as I go from 9 to 13, that has a difference of 9. So once you get your first midpoint, you can always go through and just add your class width and get the rest of your midpoint. So if I add 9 to 13, I get 22. And if I take 18 plus 26, that's going to be 44. And if I divide 44 by 2, I get 22. So if I add 9 here, I'm going to get 31. Add 9 here, I get 40. Add 9 here, I get 49. So we've gotten our class limits, our class boundaries, we have our frequencies and our midpoints. Now we can go ahead and we can copy and paste this table into Word. So let's go down here and notice this is kind of like my mock number 8 assignment. This is not actually number 8, so don't go doing this and submitting it to me and say, oh, I've done number 8. No, you haven't. Number 8 has entirely different data, so let's do Control V. Alrighty, so now let's go ahead and let's make this pertified. So the first thing that we need to do is get rid of this column. So to get rid of this column, we highlight it, and then it says delete cells. So, and then it says delete your entire column. We click OK, and that's what we want to do. The next thing that we want to do is, let's go ahead and let's go up here and let's give it a border. So we've got our border there, and let's go here, and what we can do here is we can actually get rid of this border, and let's go ahead And let's click off bottom border. Well, it's not doing it for me right now, but I'll just come back to it. It doesn't, it's no big deal. So we've got our class limits up or lower. We've got our class boundaries up or lower. Now what you could do, just to make sure that things are separated, is you could highlight here, go up here, do a left border. You could always go down here, do another left border, and we can go down here and we can go ahead and center our frequencies. And that is really bugging me here. So let me go ahead and yeah, there we go. And then we can go ahead and highlight this column and we can do another left border. Okay. And if you really kind of want to get fancy with it, you can highlight this and do another left border here. And you could go across and you can also give it a bottom border and go down here and give it a right border, and there you have it. Okay. Again, if you want it to be fancy, there are like numerous ways that you can make this table really fancy, but in any case, this is the frequency distribution for our weight data. And if you were doing this for a research project, you would want to label this. So what you could do is you could label this frequency distribution of, and let me see, what did I call it here in my Excel? Weights of carry-on luggage in pounds. Weights of carry-on luggage in pounds. Okay, so now we've given it, you can just scooch that over just a little bit. So now we've given it a title, we've got our table, and typically if you were doing this for a research project, you would also want to go across here and you would want to um, top off that table. But that's a whole nother subject. Now, let's get into 8C where you have to do your histogram. Now, for the histogram, let's go back to our Excel tutorial and let's come over here. Let's click off and let me hit escape. So, you don't want to just cut and paste this in like this, all right? You want to give it a title. So here, we don't need the legend. We would need the legend if we had more than one graph here. And we can say that this is the histogram of weights of carry-on luggage in pounds. You can always, this is an 18 point font. You can always make it look better by using a smaller font. Here, you don't want to keep it as bin. This is actually weights. And your weights are, you want to put a parentheses in pounds. Okay. So pretty much our frequency distribution looks pretty good. So I would just go ahead and I would copy this and I would, let me scroll down a little bit more. I go ahead and I would do a Control V and let me go down a little bit more. You can always grab this and format it to where to be a little bit smaller, not take up so much room. And there you have it. So here you have your frequency distribution. Here you have your histogram um, of weights of carry-on luggage in pounds. And again, you can always go ahead and you can always reformat this. Again, like I said, I like Arial font, so we can do it Arial, and we can do like a 10-point font here. And you can always do the same thing, Arial and 10-point font here for frequency. You can do Arial, 10-point font there. And there you have everything formatted for your histogram. And you can always go ahead and do the same thing for your table. You can say Arial and then go over here and then do a 10 point. Well, that was just brilliant. You can do Arial and then you can do a 10-point font here, and there you have it. So I hope that you have found this helpful to you, and I'll talk to all of you soon. Bye bye.